What's up guys, and welcome back to Tech Plant. Today I'm going to show you how to make the ultimate propagation box. I have propagated many different species in this thing, so let's check it out. To get this started, you are going to need a clear bin. At least the sides and the lid should be clear. This is so the light gets inside. Next, we're going to need three things for our propagation substrate, and that is going to be sphagnum moss, followed by some clay expanded pellets, which will be kind of our base, and then lastly some perlite. Once you've got all that kind of gathered, the first step is going to be taking that clay expanded pellets and kind of putting them in the bottom of the bin, and make sure you have a layer that's about 2 inches deep. This is going to kind of catch excess water, but also wick it up nicely into the sphagnum moss, but at the same time preventing our sphagnum moss from just sitting in water. Once you have 2 inches of the clay expanded pellets, we're going to move on to the sphagnum moss portion. You're going to want about 1.5 to 2 inches of sphagnum moss, and you got to kind of pre-wet this stuff, so you're going to want it nice and damp. Make sure you're not mixing this with the clay pellets, because again, we want to keep our layers here just to keep our sphagnum moss from getting soaking wet. Once you got the moss all squared away, next we are going to add perlite to this mix. I'm using about a 1:5 ratio, that being perlite to sphagnum moss. You can experiment with other things, but you're just going to kind of mix this into the sphagnum moss. I've done some experiments in the past, kind of trying sphagnum moss versus perlite and sphagnum moss, and I have been seeing pretty good results with the perlite sphagnum moss, so I'm going to do it with this one. If you don't have perlite, just plain sphagnum moss will work. Once you finish that, we pretty much are finished with the actual bin. So now you just take whatever cuttings you want and just kind of bury the node portion under the sphagnum moss. Again, don't break that kind of clay pellet barrier. You kind of want to leave that be, so don't push it so deep, but just deep enough where the nodes are covered in sphagnum moss. I'm trying a few species in this footage, and as I show you the updates, you will see even more species. But it's been working so far for everything I've put in there. It is really important to note that I do open this thing up every single day and kind of blow some air in with the lid just to keep it fresh in there. If you leave this thing closed for too long, you could get mold, fungus, or other weird things growing in there. So do make sure you give this thing air every single day. I let this bin sit for about a month, and I was just using one of those Barina like shop lights, just kind of sitting on the lid and giving it light for probably about 10 hours a day. Looking inside though, everything looks absolutely perfect, and you probably noticed, but I've added a lot more cuttings to this thing over the past month, and everything is rooting beautifully. Here's a large cutting of a philodendron melanochrysum, and it's doing fabulous. It's got some new growth, and it really did root well, and I bet you it's only been in there for about 2 weeks. I'm going to try and pull some stuff out of here without disturbing it too much, but I'm going to wait until I'm ready to pot almost all of the tetrasperma stuff up before I start yanking them out, because they are all pretty intertwined, so I'm excited to get those out and potted in the future. Here you can see at this point I do have a total of 6 different species in here, and they are all quite different, and they're all doing great, so I think you can put a lot of different stuff in here and have good success without too much maintenance. Looking up close, you can see that this peacock spike moss is doing fabulous. It's got roots coming out of everywhere, and I'm pretty happy with the results. Next up is some satin pothos that I threw in here, and it's already got new growth coming out of it and plenty of roots as well. Next up is a string of turtles, and I was absolutely shocked at how fast this thing actually propagated. Once you throw some tiny cuttings in there, it really spawns a ton of different growth points, and it really multiplies quickly. I did not think it was going to do well in here, but I was happily mistaken. My philodendron melanochrysum cutting is absolutely awesome in here. The humidity is really helping it quite a bit. However, you can see some of the growth is a little bit more whitish, and that's because I'm kind of overcrowding my bin. If you were to do this, I would definitely recommend just a larger bin. That way nothing gets covered by the other cuttings and everybody gets a good amount of light. My tetrasperma cuttings are also doing very good. I think within the first week and a half I was already seeing roots on some of them, but others were lagging behind, so I'm not really sure what that's about. But anything with exposed aerial roots was already putting out fresh roots just in the air because the humidity is so high in there, and it's doing excellent. Exactly 1 more month has gone by, and just from the outside you can see it is awfully green in there. Opening it up though and looking inside, you can see why. Because there is an absolute ton of cuttings in here. I mean, I am just packing this bin full. I'm just going to kind of pull stuff out at random in here so you just can see what's going on. And plenty of the stuff you saw about a month ago, there's new cuttings in here that are doing just as good and continually producing new growth. At this point, I'm just cutting everything up and just chucking it in bins like this, and it is doing fabulous. I was really surprised at the success I was getting, and I'm just happy that it's working out overall. Just to kind of remind you the important things about this bin, number 1, you got to make sure you're opening this thing up at least daily or every 2 days and giving it some fresh air. If you leave it get kind of stale in there, you're going to get mold or some other sort of fungus growth, and you don't want that. On top of that, I am using kind of a cheap Barina shop light, and I'm just setting it on top of the lid, which makes it really convenient, and that seems to be doing a lot for the new growth. They're all kind of coming out well and getting colored up nicely. Well guys, that pretty much sums up our video. I hope you enjoyed it. This thing is super easy to set up and pretty much carefree. You don't have to add water very often. It stays moist forever. Just make sure every day you open that lid, blow a little fresh air in there, and you won't get any sort of mold or fungus issues. I think it's an excellent way to propagate. So far I've tried like 6 or 7 different species of plants in here, all different types, and it's worked extremely well. I hope you guys give this a shot, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. As always, may your plants grow strong and healthy. I'll see you next time.